Everything in my world collapsed the day my son died, and my daughter-in-law Melissa kicked me out of the house I'd helped to build. She didn't even wait for the last shovelful of dirt to fall on Ethan's grave. As the cold March wind howled through Oak Ridge Cemetery, I watched her scroll through her phone with a smirk, not a tear on her flawless face. "You won't see a penny from Ethan's will, Frank. I promise you that," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. I stood there, clutching the funeral program so tightly it ripped at the edge. The other mourners, people who'd known Ethan since he was a kid running around Chicago's North Side, fell silent and drifted toward their cars. Even my old friend Susan, who had come all the way from Wisconsin for the service, lingered beside me with worry in her eyes. "Your son?" Melissa let out a bitter laugh. "He was my husband. Everything is mine now." It felt like getting punched in the gut. Ethan and Melissa had been together for 7 years, through all the highs and lows. She'd promised to love him in sickness and in health, but now, minutes after we'd buried him, she was talking about money and possessions as if love had never existed. "What's wrong with you?" "At least pretend you're sad," I whispered, not caring who overheard. My voice trembled, whether from the cold or from anger, I couldn't say. Susan reached out, her hand warm on my shoulder. "Are you all right, Frank?" I didn't answer. I just watched as Melissa slipped her phone into her expensive purse and turned away, her heels clicking across the pavement. I could see her car, Ethan's old silver Tesla, waiting by the curb, the car he'd bought her for their 5th anniversary. She didn't look back even once. Standing alone beside my son's grave, I wondered what Ethan would think if he could see her now. Did he suspect any of this? Or had I just been blind, an old fool clinging to the belief that family meant loyalty? The groundskeepers waited politely at a distance, shovels in hand, ready to finish the job. I looked down at the picture of Ethan smiling back at me from the funeral program, and my heart broke all over again. He was my only child, my pride, my reason for getting up every morning after Susan passed away. I closed my eyes, letting the icy wind sting my cheeks, and remembered Ethan at age 8, standing in our tiny garage in Evanston, hands sticky with model glue and determination in his eyes. "Dad, why does every plane have to look the same? I want mine to stand out." He'd painted his model planes in bright orange and blue, ignoring the instructions and making up his own rules. That stubborn creativity followed him into adulthood. At Northwestern, he built an app that helped people manage their schedules. Time Nest, he called it. I'd told him there were already 100 apps like that, but he insisted. "Mine will think like people do." Within 2 years, he'd sold it for $10 million. Still, what I remember most isn't the money, but the pride in his eyes when he said, "Dad, I'm going to take care of you. You deserve to rest." He bought me a little workshop behind his house, filled it with every tool I'd ever dreamed of. I barely had time to use it, though. When Ethan got sick, everything changed. Pancreatic cancer? The kind of diagnosis you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. I moved into their guest room to help. Melissa said she couldn't handle the stress, so she retreated to her office. It was me cooking Ethan's meals, driving him to chemo, trying to keep his spirits up. By the last month, he was too weak for much conversation, but he made a point of meeting with his lawyer, Leonard, a smart, trustworthy guy Ethan had always admired. "Dad, don't worry. I've made sure you'll be okay," Ethan whispered one night, his hand shaking in mine. "Melissa can't hurt you." I didn't understand what he meant, at least, not until today. After the funeral, Melissa drove us back to what used to be our home. The ride was silent except for the clicking of her nails on the steering wheel. When we pulled up to the house, my stomach dropped. 3 suitcases, my suitcases, sat on the porch. She parked, got out, and tossed the keys to me like I was her chauffeur. "Your stuff is packed, Frank. The house is mine now. Your rental agreement ended with Ethan's death." I stared at her, trying to make sense of it. "Rental agreement?" Melissa, I took care of him. I've lived here for over a year. She smiled, cold and victorious. And now it's time to move on. Inside, she handed me a folder, 3 pages of legal jargon, all signed by Ethan. Month-to-month tenancy, automatically ended at the landlord's death. My hands shook as I read it under the porch light. We just buried your husband, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. And now my new life begins, she replied. It was almost dark by the time I finished loading my car. Everything I owned fit in 3 suitcases and a box of model airplanes Ethan and I had built together. Melissa watched from the doorway, arms crossed, not a single word of comfort or gratitude. As I drove away, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror, I realized I was homeless, on the very day I'd buried my son. But one thing kept me going, Ethan's words. Trust Leonard. Tomorrow, I'd find out what my son had really planned. That night at the Oakwood Motel was a blur. The room smelled faintly of old cigarettes and cleaning fluid, but I barely noticed. I sat on the edge of the bed, the 3 suitcases stacked by the door, Ethan's photo propped up on the nightstand beside the rental agreement Melissa had tossed at me. Everything I'd known for the past 2 years had disappeared in the space of a few hours. I didn't sleep much. My mind kept replaying the last year, searching for answers I'd missed. Ethan fighting for his life, me driving him to chemo, Melissa always somewhere else. Working, she claimed, but her laptop screen was more often tuned to Zillow than spreadsheets. Before dawn, I pulled out Leonard's business card, tracing the letters with my thumb. Trust Leonard. Ethan's voice echoed in my head, steadier than mine had been for weeks. I called his office as soon as the clock hit 8 o'clock. He picked up on the second ring. Baxter and Associates, Leonard speaking. Leonard, it's Frank. Sorry to call so early. Melissa's thrown me out. I need advice. He didn't sound surprised. Frank, I'm so sorry about Ethan. I can meet you this morning. Bring the rental papers. By 10 a.m., I was riding the Old L downtown, watching the city pass by in a blur of brick buildings and rusty fire escapes. Leonard's office was on the 17th floor, overlooking Lake Michigan, all glass and steel and order, the exact opposite of my world. He shook my hand with genuine warmth, led me to a chair, and poured coffee that tasted better than anything I'd had in weeks. Melissa handed me these, I said, pushing the folder across the desk. Leonard read them quickly, then met my eyes. It's legitimate. But the law is more complicated than she thinks. You're Ethan's father, not a stranger. There are protections for you she might not know about. Relief and anxiety warred inside me. She wants me gone. What am I supposed to do? Leonard smiled for the first time. You came at the right moment. We're reading Ethan's will this Friday. Melissa, you a few witnesses. You need to be there. Bring anything she gave you, those rental documents especially. For a long moment, I just nodded, my hands tight on the coffee cup. Leonard, did Ethan really do something to protect me? He hesitated, then answered quietly. Frank, your son was a remarkable man. He thought of everything. Come Friday, you'll see. The next few days were a haze of cheap coffee and cold motel rooms. I walked the lakefront every morning to keep my mind from turning bitter. Sometimes I'd see families with kids, young men pushing strollers, and wonder what Ethan's life could have been, should have been. I called Susan in Wisconsin once, just to hear a friendly voice. You're not alone, Frank. Come visit any time, she said, and for a moment I almost believed her. Friday came with a storm, gray clouds, the kind of rain that seeps into your bones. I put on the only suit I had left, the navy one Ethan bought me for his wedding, and made my way back to Leonard's building. Conference room B was full. Melissa sat at the end of the table. Her lawyer beside her, young, sharp-eyed, the type that made money by the hour. Across from them was Tom, Ethan's old business partner, and Susan, serving as family witness. Melissa's smile was all teeth. "Frank, I'm surprised you showed up." I ignored her and sat down. Leonard started the meeting with a few words about Ethan's uncommon diligence, then pressed a button on a recorder. "This is the reading of the last will and testament of Ethan David Parker, dated February 3, 2024. Present are Frank Parker, father, Melissa Parker, surviving spouse, legal counsel for Mrs. Parker, Thomas Harris and Susan Becker, witnesses." Leonard's voice turned formal. "To my beloved wife Melissa, I leave the family residence at 1124 Oak Ridge Lane, including all furnishings and personal property, all vehicles registered in my name, and checking accounts at North Star Bank totaling approximately $350,000. Melissa's face glowed with triumph. She shot me a look of pure satisfaction, as if daring me to say something. Leonard continued. "Additionally, Mrs. Parker receives all jewelry, artwork, and collectibles purchased during our marriage, valued at approximately $90,000. Melissa's lawyer began writing furiously. Leonard raised a hand. "But there are additional bequests." The room shifted. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. "To my father, Frank Parker, who sacrificed 18 months of his retirement to care for me during my illness, I leave 50% ownership of Parker Innovations, including all shares, voting rights, and dividend distributions, currently valued at $36 million. I also leave him the workshop and all tools constructed for his use, to be relocated to property of his choosing, as well as all model aircraft we built together, and $150,000 from the education fund." The room exploded in silence. Melissa's face lost all color. Her lawyer's pen stopped moving. Tom let out a low whistle, and Susan squeezed my hand under the table. Melissa finally found her voice. "This is a mistake. I'm his wife. Everything belongs to me." Leonard simply shook his head. "Ethan's instructions are crystal clear. The law is on his side." Melissa looked at me with pure hatred. "You think you've won something, old man? This isn't over." But for the first time in weeks, I felt something besides grief. I felt hope. Ethan had done exactly what he promised. He protected me, even from the grave. As the storm raged outside, Leonard turned another page. "There is one more condition affecting all previous distributions. A special clause Ethan added 3 weeks before his death." Melissa glared at him. "What condition?" Leonard read. "If my wife, Melissa Parker, attempts to force my father Frank to leave our family home within 1 year of my death, all inheritance, house, accounts, company shares, transfers in full to Frank Parker." Melissa swayed in her chair. The room was dead silent, save for the rain tapping on the window. That was the moment I realized my son had outsmarted everyone. Melissa sat there in shock, her carefully constructed facade cracking right in front of everyone. The lawyer beside her shuffled papers, looking for loopholes, but there were none to be found. Leonard closed the will and folded his hands, letting the words hang in the air. Tom was the first to speak, breaking the tension with a nervous chuckle. "Ethan was always 3 steps ahead, wasn't he?" Melissa found her voice at last, trembling and sharp. "This isn't legal. You can't just strip me of everything. Ethan was sick. He wasn't in his right mind." Leonard stayed calm, professional to the end. "All of Ethan's arrangements were witnessed, notarized, and verified by independent medical professionals. He was fully competent. And there's a video recording as well." At that, Susan squeezed my hand again. I felt numb, not just from surprise, but from the sheer relief of knowing my son had seen the truth. He'd seen Melissa's true nature, and he'd acted to protect me. Leonard played the video on a small monitor, and Ethan's face appeared. He looked tired, thinner than I wanted to remember, but his eyes were bright and clear. "Melissa, if you're watching this, you know why," Ethan said. His voice both gentle and ironclad. Dad, I told you I'd protect you. Melissa, I hoped you'd do the right thing. But I can't let you hurt my father. If you push him out, you lose everything. Melissa's hands balled into fists, her knuckles white. The lawyer tried to whisper to her, but she shrugged him off. She knew she'd lost. In that moment, I felt the last bit of fear drain away. Tom stood and shook my hand. Frank, if you need anything at Parker Innovations, you just call. Your son builds something great. We'll make sure his vision lives on. Susan hugged me, tears in her eyes. Ethan loved you so much. He would be so proud right now. Melissa stormed out, her heels echoing down the hallway. Her lawyer gathered her things and followed, already dialing his phone, probably looking for a way to salvage her pride if nothing else. The room emptied quickly, leaving me and Leonard alone. He poured me another coffee, his manner finally relaxing. Frank, you'll have access to the accounts soon. The workshop and tools are yours. You'll need to choose a new place to live, but the house is yours now by law. Melissa has 30 days to vacate, effective immediately. I shook my head, barely able to process it all. 18 months I cared for him, Leonard. I would have done it for nothing. I know, Leonard said quietly. But Ethan wanted to thank you his way. I left the office that afternoon with a strange new feeling. It wasn't victory, not exactly. It was the return of dignity. Ethan hadn't just protected my future, he'd given me the chance to live the rest of my life on my own terms, free from Melissa's games. The next morning, I drove past the old house. Melissa's car was gone. A realtor's sign leaned against the mailbox, but she hadn't dared plant it in the yard just yet. I parked across the street and sat for a while, watching the sunlight glint off the windows, thinking about all the memories within those walls, Christmases, birthdays, nights spent in the garage building models with Ethan. My phone buzzed, Susan, checking in. Frank, are you okay? As good as I've been in months, I told her honestly. Ethan, he did more than anyone could have asked. She hesitated, then asked, What will you do now? I looked at the house, then at the sky, the city waking up all around me. I think it's time to build something new. That afternoon, I started searching for a place to set up my workshop, somewhere quiet, close enough to the city but far from old ghosts. I found a small cottage on the edge of a forest preserve, a simple place with a big yard, a detached garage perfect for my tools. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. With the legal matters moving swiftly, Leonard arranged for my things, my real things, not just the suitcases, to be delivered. The workshop was set up just as Ethan intended, every tool hanging on its pegboard, every model plane carefully arranged on the shelves. There, in the warm light of my new home, I felt peace for the first time in years. I spent days sanding wood, painting model planes in the wild colors Ethan loved, letting the memories wash over me, not with pain, but with gratitude. Melissa, meanwhile, made her exit in predictable fashion. She tried to contest the will, but the courts were unimpressed. She packed her things with more dignity than I expected, and on the last morning, she left a note on the kitchen counter. I hope you're happy, Frank. You and your son got what you wanted. For the first time, I felt nothing but pity for her. As summer settled over the city, I built new routines. Tom called about Parker Innovations. He wanted me to be part of the strategic meetings. I agreed, not because I needed the money, but because I wanted to honor Ethan's legacy. Susan visited often, bringing home-cooked meals and stories about her grandkids. Sometimes we sat on the porch in the evening, talking about the old days, about forgiveness and starting over. One afternoon, I opened a letter from the local university. Ethan's scholarship fund, funded by the Education Trust, would provide full tuition for engineering students from working-class families. I remembered Ethan's words. Dad, I want to help kids like me, kids who build things with their hands. I stared out at my workshop. The smell of sawdust and paint in the air, and realized that, despite everything, life still held possibilities. The pain of loss hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined me. Ethan's greatest gift wasn't the money or the house. It was the reminder that even in the darkest times, love and wisdom can light the way forward. It's strange how quickly a man can adjust to a new life after losing nearly everything. There's a kind of clarity that comes with hardship, the clutter falls away, and what matters most stands out in sharp relief. In my case, it was the simple things, the hum of the workshop, the ache in my hands after a day's work, the photo of Ethan on the windowsill, smiling at me in the late afternoon sun. The summer passed in a blur of routines. Every morning, I took a walk around the little lake at the edge of my new neighborhood, nodding to joggers and dog walkers, most of whom didn't know my story. I found comfort in anonymity. No one here looked at me with pity or asked about Melissa or the legal battles that had finally ended in my favor. I was just Frank, the retired engineer with a fondness for woodworking and coffee at the corner diner. I saw Susan at least once a week. Sometimes she'd bring homemade pie, and we'd sit out back, watching blue jays squabble over breadcrumbs. Other times, we'd share quiet evenings with no need for words, two old friends who understood what it meant to have lost and survived. The only part of my old life I kept close was Parker Innovations. Tom, true to his word, invited me to monthly meetings. I was no tech genius, but I knew people, and I knew what mattered to Ethan. The company's boardroom was a world away from my workshop, but I felt Ethan's presence there, too, in every decision that shaped the future of the company he'd built from scratch. The first board meeting without Ethan was tough. Tom sat at the head of the table, his face drawn and serious. "Frank," he said as the room settled, "Ethan's vision got us this far. We want your input on what comes next." I looked around at the young faces, developers, marketers, managers, most of them not much older than Ethan had been. "Ethan always said technology should make life simpler, not more complicated," I told them. "Let's remember that. Let's keep it about people." They nodded, and I could see a spark of pride in Tom's eyes. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "Frank, I know you never planned to run a company, but we could use your steadiness. Would you consider serving as chairman of the board?" It took me a moment to answer. "Tom, I'm no businessman, but if Ethan trusted you, that's enough for me. I'll do my best." That fall, Parker Innovations launched its first big charity initiative, the Ethan Parker Memorial Scholarship. We funded 20 full-ride scholarships for engineering students who'd grown up fixing cars, building computers from scraps, dreaming of something bigger than their circumstances. Each recipient got a note from me and a photo of Ethan in his Northwestern sweatshirt, grinning from ear to ear. Word got around, and letters began arriving from parents, teachers, and kids themselves. One girl wrote, "I never thought I'd have a shot at college. Now I'm going to build robots for a living. Thank you, Mr. Parker." I kept every letter in a shoebox on my desk, a quiet reminder that Ethan's legacy was about more than wealth or business. It was about giving others a chance to shine. Meanwhile, life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. Susan and I went to church on Sundays, sat in the back pew, and listened to the choir sing the old hymns that reminded us of our own childhoods. On Saturday mornings, I'd visit the farmer's market, picking out apples for pie or tomatoes for soup. The people here treated me kindly, with respect, never prying into the past. I found myself smiling more often, not out of obligation, but because I truly felt content. Of course, there were hard days, too. Some nights, I'd wake from dreams of Ethan's last days, his voice thin, but his grip strong on my hand, promising he'd take care of things. I missed him every moment, but the pain had softened, leaving only a deep, unshakable love. As for Melissa, I heard she'd left town. The house was empty for weeks before a new family moved in, a couple with young kids and a golden retriever that barked at squirrels in the front yard. I drove by once, just to see, and found myself smiling at the sight of children playing in the yard Ethan and I had once raked for leaves. Sometimes I wondered if Melissa felt any regret, but I quickly let the thought go. I had too much living left to do to waste energy on bitterness. Besides, Ethan's lesson was clear: life's too short to let the actions of others poison your spirit. By Christmas, my little cottage felt like a home. Susan and her family joined me for dinner, bringing laughter and warmth. We set a place at the table for Ethan, a simple gesture, but one that brought comfort to all of us. Later, after everyone had gone, I sat by the fire and wrote in my journal. Ethan, you gave me more than you'll ever know. I promise I'll keep building, keep loving, keep your light alive for as long as I can. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of hope for the days to come, and gratitude for the journey, however difficult it had been. Winter came to the little cottage with a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. Snow piled along the fence, and icicles sparkled in the morning sun. I spent more time in my workshop, the heat of the wood stove battling the chill, the air thick with the scent of pine and glue. Each project felt like a small victory: birdhouses for the neighbors, a rocking chair for Susan's granddaughter, and a set of brightly painted model planes for the scholarship kids who wrote to me every December. Some evenings, I'd drive out to Parker Innovations, the city lights twinkling in the distance, and meet Tom for coffee. We'd sit in his office long after the cleaning crew had left, talking about Ethan, about the company, and about life. One night, Tom showed me a proposal. Frank, we've been approached by a tech firm in California. They want to buy us out, big money. What do you think? I studied the papers, feeling Ethan's voice in the back of my mind. What would he have wanted? I asked. Tom shrugged. He always talked about keeping the company independent. Helping people, not just chasing profits. I shook my head. Let's stick to Ethan's vision. As long as I'm around, Parker Innovations will stand for something good. Tom grinned, relief evident on his face. Glad to hear it. The board trusts you, Frank. You've got a knack for making the right call. We spent the next hour dreaming up new projects, expanding the scholarship fund, building a mentorship program, and even starting an after-school club for kids who wanted to tinker with computers and robots. For the first time in ages, I felt young again, like the world was still full of possibilities. Back at home, life moved on quietly. Susan was a constant presence, her laughter brightening even the coldest days. She insisted on teaching me how to make her mother's famous apple pie, and though my crusts never turned out quite right, she assured me Ethan would have loved them anyway. The holidays brought old memories back with a bittersweet rush. On Christmas morning, I found myself standing by the window, watching the snow fall, missing Ethan more than I could say. But then the phone rang. A group of scholarship students had gotten together and called to wish me a Merry Christmas. Their voices were full of hope and excitement, and suddenly I didn't feel alone. One afternoon, I got a letter from a young woman named Natalie, the first recipient of the Ethan Parker Memorial Scholarship. She wrote, Dear Mr. Parker, I just finished my first semester in engineering. I built my own robot. Thank you for believing in me. I promise to make you and Ethan proud. I pinned her letter above my workbench, right next to Ethan's college photo. Every time I looked at it, I remembered why all of this mattered. But life had its complications too. One gray January day, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Melissa standing there, her hair a little disheveled, her eyes rimmed red. She looked nothing like the woman who had thrown me out of my own home less than a year before. She hesitated before speaking. Frank, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I lost more than just Ethan. I lost myself. I stared at her for a long moment, anger and pity wrestling in my heart. Finally, I stepped aside and let her in. We sat at my kitchen table, the old teapot steaming between us. Melissa stared at her hands, struggling for words. I thought money would fix everything, she whispered. But when the lawyers left, and the house was empty, I realized I'd lost the only family I ever had. I listened in silence, remembering Ethan's compassion, his ability to forgive even when it hurt. After a while, I found my voice. Melissa, I can't forget what happened, but for Ethan's sake, I'll try to forgive. That's what he'd want. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Thank you, Frank. I don't deserve it, but I promise, I'll make something good out of what's left of my life. Melissa left quietly, closing the door with a soft click. As I watched her walk down the snowy path, I felt a strange sense of closure. Maybe people really could change, even after everything. Maybe forgiveness was the final gift Ethan had left for both of us. As the weeks rolled on, I threw myself back into my projects. The scholarship fund flourished, Parker Innovations grew stronger, and my workshop became a gathering place for neighborhood kids who wanted to learn how to build and fix things. One Saturday morning, Susan arrived with her grandkids, arms full of cookies and stories. The house filled with laughter and warmth, a stark contrast to the loneliness of the past year. I realized then that, for all the pain and loss, I'd been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild, to forgive, and to honor Ethan's memory in ways I'd never expected. Spring was on the horizon. The trees would soon bud, the lake would thaw, and the world would come alive again. I was ready to meet it, head on, carrying my son's legacy and my own hard-earned wisdom into every new day. Spring arrived with the promise of renewal. The old snow melted away, leaving the yard muddy and the air full of birdsong. I threw open the windows of my cottage and let in the fresh breeze, grateful for another season of life, another season of hope. Parker Innovations was thriving, and every time I attended a board meeting, I felt Ethan's legacy pushing us to do more. We launched a community outreach program, coding camps in underfunded schools, free tech repair clinics for seniors, internships for kids who never dreamed they'd step inside a tech company. It amazed me how a single person's dream could ripple outward, changing lives in ways none of us could have predicted. My own life was fuller than ever. Susan and I spent long afternoons gardening or taking day trips to small towns along the lake, stopping for pie and strong coffee at little diners. Sometimes she'd bring her grandkids to my workshop, where I taught them how to build kites and birdhouses. The little ones called me Grandpa Frank, and their laughter filled the house with a joy I thought I'd lost forever. One Saturday morning, Tom called with exciting news. Frank, we got a letter from Northwestern University. They want to honor Ethan with an annual lecture series. Would you speak at the first one? The idea made me nervous, but I knew I couldn't refuse. Ethan had always believed in sharing knowledge, lifting others up. I spent days working on my speech, remembering every lesson he'd taught me, every story worth telling. When the day arrived, the auditorium was packed. Students, professors, old friends, and even some of the kids from our scholarship program. I stood at the podium, my hands shaking just a little, and looked out at the sea of eager faces. I'm just a simple man who loved his son, I began. Ethan believed in dreaming big, but he also believed in taking care of the people around him. He taught me that kindness matters, that wisdom is meant to be shared, and that you don't have to be a genius to change the world, just brave enough to try. There were tears in the crowd, and as I finished, I realized I'd never felt so connected, to Ethan, to my new community, to the life I was building one day at a time. After the lecture, a young man approached me, a shy smile on his face. Mr. Parker, I'm here on the scholarship your son created. I grew up in a tough neighborhood. Didn't think I'd ever go to college. But because of you and Ethan, I'm studying computer science. I want to build apps that help kids like me. We shook hands, and I felt a pride deeper than words. Back home, I continued pouring my energy into the workshop. The place became something of a neighborhood legend, a haven for anyone with a curious mind or busy hands. Kids brought their science projects, adults came for advice on home repairs, and more than once, I found myself teaching retired teachers how to fix their own laptops. Susan's visits became more frequent. Sometimes we talk about the past, about the people we'd lost, and the lives we built. Sometimes we'd sit in comfortable silence, sipping tea while the sun set behind the trees. One evening, after helping her granddaughter paint a model airplane purple and gold, just like Ethan used to, I found Susan waiting for me on the porch. She looked at me, a gentle smile on her lips. "You know, Frank," she said, "for a while there, I didn't think either of us would find peace again. But I look at you now, at all you've done for these kids, and I see a man who's learned to live with an open heart." Her words warmed me more than she could know. "Susan, I couldn't have done it without you. You helped me remember what matters." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "You did the same for me." There were still days when grief crept up on me, usually when I was alone, or when I found one of Ethan's old notes tucked into a book or toolbox. But more often, I felt gratitude. I was grateful for the love I'd shared, for the family I'd built, for the chance to give back. Melissa, too, surprised me one last time. She sent a letter, short and sincere. "Frank, I'm moving to California. I want to make a new start. Thank you for your forgiveness. I hope you find happiness, you deserve it." I wished her well. I realized then that letting go of old pain wasn't just for her, but for myself. Life was too precious to carry anger, especially when there was so much good left to do. That spring, Parker Innovations broke ground on a new community center, the Ethan Parker Learning Hub. The building would host coding classes, job training, and community events. I donated Ethan's old workshop tools and spent weekends helping assemble bookshelves and workbenches, surrounded by volunteers and future engineers. On the day of the grand opening, I cut the ribbon surrounded by kids, parents, and local leaders. As the crowd cheered, I felt a tear slip down my cheek, not from sadness, but from a sense of completion. Ethan's dream had outlived him. His kindness, his vision, his stubborn insistence on helping others, it was alive and thriving. And so was I. As spring gave way to summer, I spent more time outdoors, fishing on quiet mornings or teaching kids to fly model planes in the open field behind the center. The world was full of possibility, and for the first time in a long time, I looked forward to every new day. I'd lost much, but I'd gained more. A family forged by choice, a legacy built on love, and a peace that comes from living truthfully and giving generously. Ethan had once promised to take care of me. In the end, he taught me how to take care of myself, and, in doing so, how to take care of everyone else. Summer in my new life felt like a reward earned after a long, hard winter. The Ethan Parker Learning Hub blossomed into a real cornerstone of the community. On any given day, you could hear the whir of 3D printers, the tapping of keyboards, and the happy shouts of children learning to build, invent, and dream. I watched it all with quiet pride, knowing Ethan's legacy had truly taken root. One Saturday, we hosted a community picnic outside the hub. The sun was shining, laughter echoed across the grass, and tables overflowed with homemade food. Susan was there, of course, helping organize games for the kids and reminding me to wear sunscreen on my old, balding head. I looked around at all the faces, young, old, hopeful, and felt more a part of something than I had in years. After the picnic, as dusk fell, I sat on a bench overlooking the lake, Susan beside me, both of us listening to the cicadas and the distant sound of kids skipping rocks. She nudged me, smiling. "You know, Frank, Ethan would have loved this. He'd have been right in the middle of everything, teaching those kids how to code and telling terrible dad jokes." I laughed, feeling the old ache for my boy, but also a strange sense of comfort. "He always said, 'Dad, if you want to build something that lasts, start with people. Teach them, help them, and they'll carry your work farther than you ever could alone.'" Susan took my hand. That's exactly what you've done, Frank. And not just for Ethan, you've changed lives too. Her words settled over me like a blessing. By late August, the scholarship fund had grown, and more students arrived at my door with thank you notes and stories about their successes, first jobs, inventions, and even small businesses launched with a nudge from the Learning Hub. Each story filled another empty place in my heart, building a mosaic of hope where grief had once lived. On the anniversary of Ethan's passing, Tom and the Parker Innovations team invited me to speak at the company's Day of Service. Employees and scholarship students spent the day volunteering across the city, fixing up playgrounds, delivering meals, teaching seniors how to use smartphones. I gave a short speech, telling everyone that success isn't measured in dollars, but in the hands you help up along the way. Afterward, Tom pulled me aside. Frank, the board wants to name you Chairman Emeritus. It's just a title, but we hope you'll keep guiding us for years to come. I shook his hand, feeling honored and humbled. Tom, as long as you remember Ethan's spirit, you'll never need to worry about losing your way. Home life was richer than I dreamed. Susan and I started taking day trips in my old Ford, sometimes to visit nearby towns, sometimes just to sit by the lake and watch the ducks. Her grandkids, now calling me Grandpa Frank, without hesitation, came to the cottage every Sunday for pancakes and a turn in the workshop. In quiet moments, I'd find myself alone at the workbench, sanding a model plane wing or repairing an old clock, and I'd speak aloud as if Ethan were there. Sometimes, in the hush of the evening, I almost heard his reply, words of encouragement, or maybe just a gentle, approving silence. Forgiveness for Melissa had brought unexpected peace. I received a letter from her that spring. Frank, I found a job at a school out west. I help run their aftercare program. I'm learning to be better, because of Ethan, and because you showed me it's possible to start over. Thank you for not letting bitterness win. I set her letter alongside all the others, the kids, the families, the grateful parents. They formed a patchwork of new beginnings. That fall, I stood on the porch as leaves turned gold and red. I realized my greatest fear had always been ending up alone. Yet now, every corner of my life was filled with laughter, purpose, and memories that didn't hurt so much anymore. Sometimes, at sunset, I'd take a slow walk down to the edge of the woods, the last light glinting off the lake. I'd toss a model plane into the air, just as Ethan and I used to do, watching it soar and dip and finally glide to a soft landing. And as the sky faded from orange to blue, I'd feel an unbreakable connection, not just to my son, but to everyone we'd helped, everyone we'd welcomed into our lives. Ethan's plan had been perfect after all. He hadn't just saved me from losing everything, he'd shown me that love, wisdom, and a bit of stubborn kindness could build a new family and a new future. I'd learned, at last, what it really means to grow old, not just surviving loss, but building something beautiful out of what remains. So here's what I'd say, if I could speak to Ethan one more time, or to anyone who's ever felt lost after heartbreak: keep building. Keep loving. Find your second wind. Because sometimes, life's real legacy is not in what you leave behind, but in what you help others find in themselves. And if you're lucky, you'll hear, just as I did, a voice in the wind saying, "Looking good, Dad? Maybe try a little more purple on the tail section." The world keeps turning. The workbench hums. The house is warm with laughter. And in my heart, Ethan is never far away.